What if I told you that Britain didn't invade Iraq because of war, didn't invade for democracy, and didn't even invade for empire? What if the real reason was something far more practical, far more profitable, and far more dangerous, something that reshaped global power for more than 100 years? In 1914, Britain quietly launched a military invasion into a land most British citizens couldn't even locate on a map. There was no public debate, no dramatic declaration, and no clear explanation given to ordinary people. Yet, this single operation locked the Middle East into a century of instability and quietly elevated one man into the center of modern power politics. That man was Winston Churchill. Welcome to its financial history, too. And the real reason Britain invaded Iraq was something the government preferred to keep buried beneath official excuses. It was oil, control, and a secret war fought before the world truly understood what energy meant. At the start of the 20th century, the British Empire appeared invincible. It stretched across continents, ruled sea lanes, and dominated global trade. But beneath this image of strength was a growing vulnerability. The empire ran on coal. Coal-powered factories, railways, and the greatest navy the world had ever seen. For decades, coal had been enough. But technology was changing faster than empires could adapt. A new fuel was emerging, one that burned more efficiently, allowed ships to travel farther, and made fleets dramatically faster. That fuel was oil, and Britain didn't have it. In 1911, Winston Churchill became First Lord of the Admiralty, effectively placing him in charge of the Royal Navy. Britain's naval dominance was not symbolic. It was existential. Without control of the seas, Britain could not defend its empire, protect its trade, or survive as a global power. Churchill studied naval technology closely and reached a dangerous conclusion. Coal-powered ships were becoming obsolete. Oil-powered ships would define the future of warfare. They were faster, required fewer crew members, and could outmaneuver any coal-powered rival. If Britain did not convert its navy to oil, it would eventually lose control of the seas. But switching to oil came with a terrifying problem. Britain had coal in abundance, but oil existed only in specific regions of the world. Choosing oil meant choosing dependence on foreign supplies. It meant betting the survival of the empire on resources Britain could not directly control. Churchill made the decision anyway. This single choice triggered a chain reaction that would reshape the Middle East forever. At the time, one region stood out as especially promising: Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Geological surveys and intelligence reports suggested vast oil reserves lay beneath its soil. The land was still controlled by the Ottoman Empire, which was weakening, overstretched, and riddled with corruption. To British planners, Mesopotamia looked like both an opportunity and a threat. If Britain secured the oil, it would guarantee naval supremacy for decades. If it failed, another power, especially Germany, might gain access first. In an age of rising global rivalry, that risk was unacceptable. In 1914, something unprecedented happened. The British government quietly bought a controlling stake in a private company called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which would later become BP. This meant Britain wasn't just seeking access to oil, it was buying ownership. Churchill personally pushed this deal through Parliament. Publicly, he framed it as a matter of national security rather than profit. Privately, it tied British military strategy directly to corporate oil interests. For the first time in history, a major power was preparing for war, not just to defend territory, but to secure long-term energy supply chains. And World War I erupted. Europe descended into chaos in August 1914, and under the cover of this global conflict, Britain made its move. British forces landed in Basra, in southern Iraq, only weeks after the war began. Official explanations spoke of protecting trade routes, defending British India, and countering Ottoman aggression. But the first British military objectives were not cities or enemy armies. They were oil fields, ports, and infrastructure. This was no coincidence. The invasion of Iraq was not an afterthought of World War I. It was a strategic energy operation disguised as a military necessity. Once Britain secured southern Iraq, the consequences unfolded rapidly. The Ottoman Empire collapsed under the pressure of war. Britain and its allies redrew borders across the Middle East, creating new states that served strategic interests rather than social or cultural realities. Iraq was stitched together from diverse regions with little concern for unity. Friendly rulers were installed, revolts were crushed, and governance was structured around maintaining control over oil extraction. Stability was promised, but instability was built into the system itself. Britain achieved its immediate goal. Iraqi oil flowed into British hands. The Royal Navy was fueled. British industry thrived. Modern warfare accelerated. But Iraq paid the price. Foreign control bred resentment. Local voices were ignored. Economic benefits flowed outward while political pressure built inward. By the mid-20th century, Iraq had become a pressure cooker of nationalism, anger, and resistance. Britain believed it could manage the system indefinitely. It was wrong. By the 1950s, demands for national control over oil intensified. Monarchies fell. Military regimes took power. Britain retreated, but the structure it created remained intact. Power vacuums invited new players. The United States stepped in. Multinational oil corporations expanded their reach. Security alliances replaced colonial administration. Different flags flew, but the logic stayed the same. Energy security came before sovereignty. Decades later, the same patterns resurfaced. Interventions were justified with language security, stability, freedom, but the underlying drivers remained unchanged. Control of resources meant control of power. From Iraq to Libya to other strategically critical regions, the model that began with Churchill's decision continued to shape global conflict. Today, the world is once again undergoing an energy transition. Oil is still powerful, but new resources, rare earth minerals, lithium, data infrastructure are becoming the foundations of future dominance. The names have changed. The rhetoric has evolved. But the mechanism is familiar. Whoever controls the resources controls the system. The invasion of Iraq in 1914 was not just a historical event. It was the birth of a new kind of warfare, one where economics quietly drives military decisions, where wars begin long before the first shots are fired, and where consequences last for generations. The first lesson is that wars are rarely fought for the reasons given to the public. Ideology explains them, but economics drives them. The second lesson is that energy transitions create geopolitical earthquakes. Coal to oil reshaped the 20th century. What replaces oil may define the 21st. The third lesson is that decisions made quietly by a small group of elites can shape the lives of millions who never had a voice in the matter. Churchill believed oil would secure peace through strength. Instead, it created endless competition and conflict. As the world moves toward new resources and new forms of power, one question remains unanswered. Are we learning from history or are we repeating it? Because history does not repeat itself exactly, but it always rhymes. If this story changed how you see history, like the video. If you want deeper explanations of hidden wars, economic power, and the forces shaping our world, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, was Iraq invaded for security or for oil? Because the answer might change how you see every war that came after it.